Okay, welcome back. We are ACI 13, class second half of 5. It's June 25th, 2026. Let's gather our minds here as we usually do. Please bring your attention to your breath until you hear from me again. Now bring to mind that being who for you is a manifestation of ultimate love, ultimate compassion, ultimate wisdom. And see them there with you, gazing at you with their unconditional love for you, smiling at you with their holy great compassion, their wisdom radiating from them, that beautiful golden glow encompassing you in its light. And then we hear them say, bring to mind someone you know who's hurting in some way. Feel how much you would like to be able to help them. Recognize how the worldly ways we try fall short. How wonderful it will be when we can also help them in some deep and ultimate way, a way through which they will go on to stop their distress forever. Deep down, we know this is possible. Learning about emptiness and karma, we glimpse how it's possible. And so I invite you to grow that wish into a longing. And that longing into an intention. And with that intention, we turn our minds back to our precious holy being. We know that they know what we need to know, what we need to learn yet, what we need to do yet, to become one who can help this other in this deep and ultimate way. And so we ask them, please, please teach us that. And they are so happy that we've asked. Of course, they agree. Our gratitude arises. We want to offer them something exquisite. And so we think of the pure world they are teaching us how to create. We imagine we can hold it in our hands and we offer it to them, following it with our promise to practice what they teach us, using our refuge prayer to make our promise. Here is the great earth. filled with fragrant incense and covered with a blanket of flowers. The great mountain, four lands, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we realize Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may all beings totally awaken for the benefit of every single other. So last class we were talking about objects. The topic of the class is objects and subjects. In the Tibetan language, Yul and Yul Chen. But all we covered was the object part. And we went into some detail, right? We divided those Yuls into things that could be found in any one of the five heaps, which expanded our idea of what makes up our five heaps, I think, right? If we thought about it. If we ended up with that, like, perplexing, how is it that me and my parts is the same as saying me and my world is the same as saying all existing things? Right? Clues. Clues as to what it takes to come to perceive ourselves as Buddha. So this class is exploring Yulchen, object possessors, which is how they say subjects. And of course, we need a definition so that we can all agree we're talking about the same thing. And the definition they give is Rang Yula Jupe Chu. Rang Yula Jupe Chu. Rang Yul means any existing thing. And La Jupe Chu means which engages in an object. Any existing thing which engages in an object, which in English is still kind of awkward because we don't really say, as we're taking out the trash, I'm engaging with the object of my trash can. But if we were to try to describe the difference between me, the object, what makes me the subject in a given experience is that the subject me isn't there all by myself. There's something else, and I am experiencing something else. And technically, one would have to say that I'm not really the subject unless or until I'm interacting with an object, because that's how I differentiate myself as the subject. And that's getting beyond logic class. But our minds might go there as we're trying to sort this out. What really is a subject versus an object? So we'll explore it the way Geshe-Michael did. He said, let's consider changing things. There's no real need to study them because there are no divisions of them into various parts. So when we're learning how to think by way of Buddhist logic, anytime you hear somebody say such and such because of such and such else, you want to start by looking at what's the topic they're talking about and what was the reason they just gave. And is there some relationship between that topic and that reason? Right? We look for that correct relationship to hold. So I said, consider changing things. No need to study them because there are no divisions of them into various parts. So you think changing things, divisions of them into parts, it's not true that that's not true, right? Changing things can be divided into different kinds of changing things, different parts of changing things. So it's like, no, it's not true what you just said. When you're debating in Tibetan, you would say, Tamadrup, your reason is incorrect. Right? In English, we would just say, oh, you're not right about that. So we would then say to our opponent, so you're saying there are divisions of changing things. And we're thinking, well, yeah, that's why I said no to the previous statement, because I know there are divisions. But when we're in this logical thinking flow, when we say yes to something, we need to be ready to explain ourselves. So, yes, there are divisions of changing things. All right, then, what are divisions of changing things? And there are zillions of ways we can divide changing things. But the way we did divide them for the purposes of our study was changing things can be divided into physical changing things, mental changing things, and changing things that are not all physical and not all mental. They don't fit in either one of those categories, but they're still existing changing things. So they get this category of their own, Denmen Duje, we call. So, okay, let's consider subjects, Yulchen. Subjects are positive, changing things. Positive meaning they are presences. They are something there, not whether they're good or bad. Just something present means positive. Consider subjects. They are positive, changing things. So they must be found, be able to be found in one of those three categories of changing things. If we say all changing things can be found in one or the other of physical things, mental things, and changing things that are neither one of those two, then any existing changing thing should be able to be found in one of those categories. And I suppose I could say at least one, although maybe that would get me in trouble in the long run. So if we agree with that statement, we should be able to find subjects amongst those three categories. Then we can go on, right? If we don't agree, we have to go a different direction. So do we agree that subjects are changing existing things? I think so. And if that's the case, then do we agree we should be able to find them either amongst physical things, amongst mental things, or in that category of changing things that are neither physical nor mental? So if we agree, we can go on. So can a subject, that which possesses the object, can that be in the category of unchanging things? No, because to possess an object means to be aware of the object, and that means to experience an object. So suppose you, the subject, are hanging out there all by yourself, and then along comes a butterfly, and you experience the butterfly. The butterfly is the object. You are the subject experiencing the object. Have you, the subject, changed by way of experiencing the object? Yes. No butterfly. Me. Butterfly. Now I'm changed. I'm different than I was before because now I am experiencing the butterfly. So if I change by way of experience and object, that means me cannot be in the category of unchanging things, which we already assumed was correct, but we were just checking. Right? Me is a presence. Subject, me subject is a positive thing, a presence, and it's changing. All right. Hold that in mind. So now let's go looking for the subject in those three different categories of what kinds of changing things are existing in the world. Let's go looking for subjects in the group of material things, in the group of mental things, and in the group of things that are not quite either one of those. So just before we start analyzing, if you think about a subject, that which experiences the object, what do you think? Like in your gut, is it a physical thing, a mental thing, or this Denman Doogie thing? Seems like mental. But then it's like, no, but the subject is me, Sarani. And me, Sarani, where does me, Sarani fall in those three? Sarani is a concept, it's an idea. It has physical component, it has mental component, what it is aware of, but Sarani is Denman Duje. So which is the subject? Sarani or that mental awareness that's saying Sarani? So let's check. When we say mental, a mental changing thing, we said before, mental things are something that's clear and aware. So if we say, consider me as subject, Sarani. Sarani cannot be a subject because Sarani is not physical and is not mental. Sarani is just a concept. A concept can't engage in its object. It's just a concept. Some subject has to have the concept. So if Sarani is not a subject, then Sarani cannot engage an object, cannot possess an object. And if Sarani cannot engage an object, then Sarani cannot experience chocolate. That's not fair. Because we said subjects are mental things and subjects are that which engage the objects. So if Sarani is neither mental nor physical, but something else, then Sarani can't be the subject. Or maybe Yul Chen subjects are not all mental, because Sarani does experience chocolate sometimes. So let's check. Consider this body, Sarani's body. It cannot be the subject because it does not engage in objects. So start your logical thinking. Is it true about the body, Sarani's body, that it does not engage in objects? What do we know about how we perceive something? Which is why we've learned how it is that we've perceived something. My eye tissue picks up colors and shapes and sends that information to the visual awareness, visual consciousness, which identifies the object. So it seems like the eye tissue, which is physical matter, is engaging an object. So the physical matter can be subject too. So we've said Sarani as Denmin Duje didn't look like it could be the subject, but we know, each of us know, that we, by way of what we call ourselves, the concept me, does experience things. And then we said that which is simply clear and aware, yeah, that engages the object. But then doesn't the eyeball, the eye tissue, also engage the object? Because it's what picks up the color and shape. The ear is what picks up the decibels. Without that, the mind can think of an object, but it doesn't have a tangible object in front of it without getting some kind of information from our body tissue. So then it seems like all three categories of changing things can be a subject, something which apprehends an object, doesn't it? But they say, if we look more closely, the eye power does pick up color and shape, and it sends that information to the eye consciousness. The eye consciousness becomes visual awareness, and the visual awareness of the color shape happens a millisecond after the eye power does its thing. So which is actually engaging in the object? When does the object become the object? Is it at the eye power, color shape, or at the visual awareness where it's butterfly? And if, when we determine when the object becomes the object in question, then that's what would determine what has served as the subject. So if in our example of just simply color and shape, the eye tissue is the subject for perceiving color and shape, but the eye tissue is not the subject of the perceiving the butterfly, because that doesn't happen till an instant later. And that's not done by the eye tissue. That's done by the visual awareness. Well, then it's the visual awareness that is the subject. But if you think of yourself as the subject, aren't you a whole lot more than your visual awareness? Seems like it. It seems like there's a subject that has visual awareness, the object of visual awareness. And that subject is the real subject that's experiencing the butterfly. But technically it's not, because it's the visual awareness that's experiencing the butterfly as a visual object. And we don't become the subject experiencing object butterfly until we're experiencing the butterfly. So it's not so clear when we really analyze with clear thinking exactly where is that subject in the category of changing things. We're not, right? It's like it's a little portal into the emptiness of subjects and the emptiness of objects that we've studied before in different places. But here it's revealing itself again, simply in this exercise of trying to establish what category of existence do these things, objects and subjects, fall in. We want them to show up in the outline in a really neat place. And it's no surprise that they don't. So if physical matter can be a subject, because we just concluded, depending at what relationship of subject-object we're talking about, physical matter can be the subject, mental can be the subject, and so can those things that are neither of those. But if physical matter can be a subject, then rocks must engage their objects. And it's like, no, there's physical matter that's sentient, and there's physical matter that's not sentient. And not sentient physical matter can't ever be a subject, because it can't ever have the awareness of engaging its object in an object. But then when we look at our own physical body, Didn't we say before we have our physical body, like our skin, that provides tactile information so that we get a certain amount of our existing experience through that tactile sensation. But then we've got our fingernails, and where the fingernails are attached to tissue underneath, we can sensate them. But there's a part of our fingernail that we doesn't have sentience. So like how do we distinguish between my own physical body, that which is subject because it has some sentience, and that which doesn't, like my hair? So my body is my subject, but not my hair, and not my fingernails once I cut them and leave them in the trash. Like, can we really say that we can distinguish physical matter that has sentience versus physical matter that doesn't have sentience? Just because eye tissue picks up color and shape, is it something that is a clear and aware? Does our eyeball have this awareness? I am picking up colors and shapes, and I will send that information to the visual awareness. It doesn't seem to happen like that. So they say, really, when you dig down deep, physical matter cannot be the subject. So in the end, we get here's our position, which the conclusion they come to is only mental things are subjects, because only the mental part has the valid perception of the object. Surani is not the consciousness that is aware of the butterfly. Somehow, that mind moment, clear and aware, is the subject side. And yet in our experience, it's like subject side is me. That which is clear and aware is me. And if we want to put a name on the me so that we can tell this me apart from all the objects in my world, then we give it this name and we go by a name. We know the name is not me. The me that the name applies to is me. But it sure feels like a substantial, I want to say independent, but I know I'm not independent, but I don't know, I can't get a right word. Every word I try, it's like, no, that's not right. A separate thing, a separate existing there thing that is what has all the experiences. And according to this, it has to be the thing that engages the object in order to be the subject. So does that mean if you were your subject, you not engaged in any object whatsoever, that you would not be a subject? And it's like we really can't even conceive of existing and not having some experience of existing. And that means there's a subject and an object going on. But it doesn't mean there's a subject there first and then along comes an object. And it doesn't mean there are objects there first and then along comes a subject. It's that it takes both to have either, but you never have either. You always have both constantly changing. Okay. So if it's true that subjects must be found in this category of existing, changing things which are mental, we want to explore this category of mental things. What does that mean? What's all in that category? So that we can understand what's meant by subject side a little bit better. So we can divide mental things into two divisions according to the logic schools, Rangrik and Shenrik. Rangrik, Rang means itself or oneself. Rik means to know. Rangrik is to know oneself. They use the word apperception. So it isn't really just to know oneself, it's to perceive oneself. Self-awareness, the ability of the mind to know itself. So our mental things that are self-aware are in this category of Rangrik, subcategory of mental thing. So these two lower schools, Sautrantika and Sutras, they explain that when we perceive something, we have a simultaneous perception and the awareness of the perception. Meaning, when we're looking at the color blue, we simultaneously see blue and we are aware of ourselves seeing blue. Madhyamaka school disagrees. They say the mind cannot be aware of two different objects at the same time. Toggle back and forth really fast, yes, but you can't hold two appearances at the same time. For them, the two appearances would be yourself and the object. But logic school says, no, you must be aware of yourself seeing blue when you are seeing blue. Because once the blue goes away, you can have the memory, I saw blue. They say that if you did not have the perception of yourself seeing blue when you saw blue, once the blue was gone, you would not be able to say, I saw blue. Because that's a different, that requires the awareness of having been there to see blue, having done it. We addressed this when we were studying Master Shantideva's 9th chapter, wisdom chapter. And Madhyamaka says, to lower away. That's silly because of the example of the rat bite. And still it's like, oh my gosh, how does that prove anything? But the end result of the rat bite story was the bear makes this logical deduction that he got bit by something because he wasn't awake enough to be aware of having gotten bit. If I were the lower school, I'd be using that as proof for what I say. He had to have been awake enough to know he got bit in order to have the memory of getting bit. But high school says, see, he got bit even though he wasn't aware of getting bit. And he figured it out later. So Wrongrik. Shenrik. Shen means other. So other to know means Shenrik, meaning mental things that are aware of something other than itself. And this can be divided into two kinds of other awareness, Sam and Samjung. Sam is the word they use for the main mind of a suffering human being, as opposed to a Buddha mind. We don't use the word Sam for Buddha mind, I don't believe. I don't know what word we do use. Dharmakaya probably. But the main mind, Sam, which we would try to get away with saying the mind itself, but we'd get in trouble doing that. And then some Samjung, which is the mental functions. Those mental functions that are running around in our main mind all the time. Those things that make up our heap of all the other factors, with the exception of two of those that get their own heap, they are still mental functions. So in this heap of Samjung, changing things that are mental, that are other aware mental things, is our experiences, awareness of our experiences of feelings, discrimination, concentration, attention, anger, jealousy, sleep, pride, virtuous states of mind. The list goes on. Every mind that's existing in the universe has some amount and form of Samjung. Even the most lowly bug has concentration, has focus, probably more focus than I do. So in Abhidharma, they say the mind has 46 mental functions. In logic school, they say the mind has 51 mental functions. The difference has something to do with the sensory function, whether those are considered a samjung or not. All right, so mind and mental functions is one way to talk about other awareness. Another way to divide, that's how to divide other awareness, mind and mental function. Now, another way to divide mental things. So we just divided it into self-aware and other aware. Now we're dividing mental things differently into sema and semingilo. Sema, we know, means valid perception. Valid perception, we've learned, means the perception that we have given the conditions in which our mind is not affected by drugs or alcohol or sickness or a really strong mental affliction or a circumstance where there's a weird thing of physics going on that gives us a wrong perception, which means 99.99% of our perceptions are sema, valid perceptions. I looked it up in the dictionary. What does it mean to be valid? And it uses words like well-founded or sound or well-grounded or credible, effective or legitimate. So none of those words quite fit either what we're trying to say. what we experience is valid as long as we are not under these other conditions. Then senmenki lo means a perception, a mental event, which is not valid. And then not valid means that the mind having the experience is itself being influenced by something else. The mind that's under the influence of alcohol, drugs, etc., those other things, when it's having its what we would call valid perception, it's not valid because it's influenced by the effect of this other stuff. It doesn't mean what you experience when you're drunk has not happened, because clearly it does. The drunk driver gets in an accident, their car's all banged up. But the way that mind perceived that series of events was colored by the effect of the alcohol or drugs or whatever it was. So that's said to not be a valid perception. Is it a perception? Absolutely. Did it happen? Absolutely. Is it all incorrect because it's not valid? No, we're mixing ideas. So when the mind is functioning uninfluenced and it perceives information and comes up with the identity, that identity is valid. Is it how the object of experience truly exists? No. But is it valid perception? Yes, because it's not skewed by these other effects, right? So valid and not valid. Not correct versus incorrect, but valid versus invalid. So we asked the school, logic school, what's the definition of a valid perception so that we can all be talking the same thing? And they say, oh, valid perception is sardu milue rikpa. Sardu means fresh. Milue is unerring, which they're using as another word for valid, because it can't mean unerring according to how a thing truly exists. Sardu milue, fresh, unerring rikpa perception. Why do they need the word fresh? Because this lower school considers that memory, I saw the color blue, as not a valid perception because there's no blue right there now. I'm remembering the valid perception of blue that I had before when I have the memory now of blue. So even if my memory of blue is ripening in my mind and like behind my eyeballs, I'm seeing blue, it's not the blue I saw when I saw it. It's a memory of blue. And so they say valid perceptions need to refer to those experiences that we're having now, not the ones we remember having had. So valid perception means fresh, unerring perception. And then highest school, we have heard, says, no, the definition of valid perception, sema, is milue rikpa, unerring perception, unaffected perception. The mind's not affected by anything else. It's having that valid perception. They say when we are having a memory, I saw blue. They say That is a valid perception of a memory. You say, I saw blue. That means you know it's a memory. So they don't make this distinction between the current experience as memory or not memory, because it's still a current experience. And as long as we're not influenced by those other things, that current experience is valid perception. So all these little details are little bits of clues that you'll find yourself using as you're trying to figure out, what's the appearing nature of me and the empty nature of me, and, where are they and when do they happen, and right, all of that stuff that we're chewing on to figure out what we need to do to become beings who can stop the suffering of the world. Everything in this class are these little seeds being planted in your mind that are going to bubble around and then finally come up and you'll go, oh, wow. Oh, cool. I see now. And there's probably many, many, many more, still bubbling around in me. So now let's investigate valid perceptions. We're still trying to figure out what is this thing, the subject, that which perceives the object. So we're digging into what is it to perceive an object validly versus in an affected way. And now we've zeroed in on valid perceptions. Let's investigate valid perceptions. They can be divided into two kinds. How's my time? Nunsum sema and jepak sema. Nunsum sema means direct perception, valid perception. Jepak sema means conceptualization, valid perception by conceptualization. So a direct perception, a direct valid perception, is a valid perception that does not require any conceptualization. So they say that the direct awareness of an object or the awareness of our own thoughts, in logic school, those are direct perceptions. They say, wrong, Rick. Self-awareness is a direct perception. A direct perception means you experience the object and your experience is directly the object. You don't have to you don't have to put things together to come up with an idea of the object. And at first pass, it's like, whoa, everything I experience directly. Here's the pen directly. Here's my glasses directly. And it seems like that until we start investigating a little bit. Then Jepaksema means valid perception involving conceptualization. Jepak is conceptualization. So Geshe-la said, in direct perception, you see blue. In conceptualization, valid perception, we come to the valid perception of the object based on something other than the direct perception of it. So we can apparently directly perceive blue, but the minute you call it blue sky, you have a conceptualization. Not all blue is blue sky. Very likely, when we experience blue, we're not just experiencing direct blue. We very swiftly, if not immediately, have the object that is blue. And that took conceptualization based on stuff other than simply the blue. Because blue alone is not sky, it's not blue jeans, it's not all those other things that can be blue. So in valid perceptions based on conceptualization, there are three different kinds. When we say that which exists, how did that go? An existing thing is that which is perceived by valid perception. And now they're saying, look, there are different kinds of valid perception. And do all of those valid perceptions therefore establish a thing's existence? Or is it going to be like narrowed down to just one kind of valid perception? Their punchline's going to be any valid perception of an object establishes that object's existence. So direct perception is, there it is. Yes, it exists. Conceptualization, valid perception, is how we establish as existing things that we don't or can't yet have a direct perception of. Why would we bother to do that? Because maybe there are existences like hell realms, hungry ghost realms, that we cannot directly prove exist by way of direct perception, but we could prove exist by way of one or more of these conceptualization valid perceptions. And if we were to prove to ourselves that a hell realm exists, we would then be able to set about avoiding the kinds of behaviors that would put us into a direct valid perception of one. And if we could conceptually, validly perceive our own future Buddha paradise, we could then know that by setting about to create the causes of that Buddha paradise, we could bring on its direct valid perception. So by using conceptualization to prove the existence of something that we can't yet directly experience is enough to establish the existence of that object, which will be enough to help us choose different behaviors. So who cares really about establishing the existence of bananas in the grocery store that I can't see right now? But to be able to establish the existence of hell realms, or to be able to establish the existence of your own future Buddha you, those would be two pretty important things to figure out whether or not they do exist just by way of our conceptualizing them. Like to think about hell realm makes it happen, that's not enough to prove it to ourselves. But if we can apply these ideas that we're learning to the logic process, we can come to a valid perception of those things that we can't see. Let's take our break. Okay, are we back? Hard to know. I'll say we're back. So there are three kinds of valid perceptions established through conceptualization. Three kinds of JPOC sema. One of them is JPOC Nuto. Another is JPOC Drakpo. And the third is JPOC Yiche. JPOC Nuto means deductive. Deductive, logical, conceptual, valid perception. So Geshe-la's example went like this. See, I am holding a pen. Now, watch and listen carefully. Do I have a pen in my hand? You can think, well, it was in her hand. I saw her put her arm behind her back, well, part of it anyway. I didn't hear anything drop. I didn't see anything drop. So I can logically conclude that the pen is still in her hand. And so we would be bold enough to say, yes, you have a pen in your hand. And you would be right, because I agree. I didn't hear it drop. I didn't see it drop. Another example is, suppose you're driving along and you look and there's a car smashed against the tree. That our direct experience is car smashed against the tree. Our instant of deduction is, oh my gosh, there was an accident. Somebody drove their car into the tree. We don't know for sure if that's true. But the direct is the information. The story we make about it is this conceptualization. So the conceptualized valid perception is there was an accident. The direct experience, car against the tree. So the accident is a valid perception given deduction. We didn't see the accident happen, but we presume, we deduct an accident did happen because the tree is against the car is against the tree, and that's not normally what cars do. So that makes it valid. Is it correct? Not necessarily, but given the moment's experience, that's the difference between direct and deductive. You put two and two together and come up with something else, and you've made a deductive, conceptualized perception. This is what we're using when we are considering whether hell realms exist, Buddha paradises exist, karma is true. We're learning how to deduce things from information that we get in order to come to this deductive conclusion of the truth of something. And that deductive conclusion, if the deduction is done correctly, makes a valid perception, and that makes the thing that we are considering an existing thing. Proof that it exists, we could say. So Geshe-la said, if we understand well the thing about material causes and contributing factors, we can validly deduce things, and our perception of them is just as valid as if we have seen them directly. And anything that a valid perception perceives exists. So we can learn to validly deduce the emptiness of ourselves and our world, repeatedly bringing ourself to that deductive, valid perception of it. And that makes it exist. And that makes the you validly perceiving emptiness by way of deduction exist. And that's a seed that will grow into the direct perception validly existing you, meaning Arya, you. So people say, how do I plant the seeds to see emptiness directly? Big clue there. Study material causes, the thing that flops over into the other thing. That's the direct cause, and all the contributing factors. In this view of direct experience, logical deduction experience, making things exist. Anyway, have fun with that. Second kind of conceptualized valid perception is it sounds like Drakpo, but when it's said, it's more like Dakpo. You don't really hear the R. Makes the D different somehow. Dakpo. Jepak Drakpo. It means well known, as in Lobsang Drakpo, well known, pure mind. Jasum Kappa. But here what they mean by well known is known by many, as in by way of consensus. So they say that perception by consensus, by agreement, by convention, makes a valid conceptual perception, which makes the thing that it's referring to exist. And the typical example in the United States, at least, is for a while, the United States government was known as Uncle Sam. I don't know if anybody uses that anymore, but you could have a conversation and be talking about Uncle Sam, and everybody hearing your conversation would know you were talking about the US government, not, your uncle that lives around the corner. Because by convention, everybody agrees that this means that. Another example is in Tibet, they call the moon the house of the rabbit, because on full moon, they look at the moon and they see a rabbit in the moon. On our side of the world, we say we need to see a man in the moon, but it's the same idea. And it's by convention, everybody agrees. And that makes our perception of Uncle Sam, meaning the US government, a valid conceptualized experience. You don't see Uncle Sam and you don't ever see the US government, right? It's an idea. But it makes the conceptualization is agreed by everybody. Then the third one is Jepak Yiche. That means valid conception based on rational belief. Yiche means rational belief. And what this is referring to is a belief in something based upon whoever or whatever shared that belief with us, we consider an unquestionable authority. So rational belief gives the wrong connotation to me. This Yiche, Jepak Yiche, is like based on a valid authority, but a valid authority telling us so. The thing with valid authority is it's up to us to prove to ourselves that the source of this belief that's going to make the existence of it true by way of our valid conceptual perception, we need to prove to ourselves that that source is absolutely infallible. And that's what rational belief means. It's like not just blind faith. Oh, so and so said so, and so I believe everything they say. It's you figured it out. That's the rational. You figured out that this source cannot say something wrong, cannot tell a lie, cannot give wrong information, knowing it's wrong. So I think it was course 2 in ACI, where we spent a long time trying to prove that a Buddha is a being of, what was it? Correct, valid perception or something like that, which was supposed to reveal that they could not even hear themselves say something that's wrong, say something that they had not themselves personally experienced as true. And it was supposed to be able to help us prove to ourselves that the Buddhist scriptures are all accurate. And then the more we learned and the deeper we go into the different levels of teachings, it's like, whoa, that Buddha who can't say anything wrong seemed to contradict himself all over the place. And so we needed to go on to learn that skill of knowing when an infallible speaker is speaking figuratively or literally. And then even that training about what's figurative and what's literal is really slippery. So, however, once we've used our experience and our logic to prove a certain source of information as infallible, once we do, then anything they teach us, we can consider as validly existing, right, as true, because we've already proved to ourselves the truth of their words. Not that we still don't need to figure out the meaning and how it applies to our own life. As Buddha himself said, don't just believe what I say, test it, rub it, burn it, whatever those 3 were we learned. Prove it to ourselves. And that will make it so, says this reasoning about rational belief conceptualizations are valid perceptions, and that proves existence. Or maybe better, it gives existence. Just because we prove someone to be incapable of saying something in error doesn't mean our neighbor is going to believe that, or even that our neighbor is going to come to the same conclusion. So it's our own personal rational belief that we're working with. Wow. Okay. So the last section of class 5 that Geshe-la did all in one class was uh, going into our not method, we did do methods of debate also, but the things we need to know in order to be working with our debate syllogisms, our logical syllogisms. And last class we talked, maybe it was a class before, we talked about the difference between a reason and a good reason. And we learned that a correct reason is a reason in which those three relationships hold. And we learned the three relationships and the stepwise process of checking them, which is necessary to go in that order. Does 1 and 3 have a relationship? If so, if 3 is true, is 2 also true? And if so, if you negate 2, does that necessarily negate 3? And if so, you've got a proof. And if you still don't believe it, got to unpack it and start again. So in talking about correct reasons, there are there I don't know the word. Correct reasons will fall within 3 different categories. A statement that number 3, that in fact contributes to the upholding of the 3 relationships, could be a kind of reason that has to do with results, having to do with the result of something, being the result of something. So we had the term tayandak as a correct reason. And then within correct reasons, you'll find them in these different categories. Meaning when we're trying to make a reason that proves something we're wanting to prove, look for a result reason, look for its own nature reason, or look for the reason by way of an absence of something. That's these 3. Where are they? Dre Tayandak, Rang Shin Tayandak, and Mamikbe Tayandak. Dre means result, a correct reason by way of a result. Their example, classical example, is consider a mountain pass. There must be a fire over there because there's a big cloud of smoke in that mountain pass. So we'd have to be standing there with the person looking at the mountain pass in order for us to apply ourselves to this syllogism. And we're looking at the mountain pass over there, and we see, in fact, there is a big cloud of smoke. So we can say, yes, the relationship between 1 and 3 holds. Let's go to the next one. If there's a big cloud of smoke, is it necessarily true that there's fire there? And I'm going to say, if we agree that where there's smoke, there's fire, then we go to the 3rd test, negate 2. And does that necessarily negate 3? If there's no fire on that mountain pass, then there can be no smoke there, which seems like it negates, it doesn't hold, because look, there's smoke. But what if our conclusion was then, well, then what we're seeing there isn't smoke, it's some other cloud of dust. It's possible, right? So then it's like, was our reason a correct reason as a result or not? And so I have trouble with this particular example. They're using it to say the syllogism holds. If there's no fire there, there could be no cloud of smoke, which is true. It would hold. Is that what's happening in the moment? No, there is a cloud there. But when we're applying these syllogisms, the if three, then two, and if not two, then not through two, three, it's not about what's true in the world. It's what's about logically. If there's no fire, there can be no smoke. At least back in the old days, where the only time you had fire, you had smoke, and the only time you had smoke, you had fire. Now we have fire without smoke. There are all kinds of things that are burning but don't make smoke anymore. But not back in Tibetan debate days, apparently. So when you are making a syllogism and you want a correct reason for the assertion about your subject, consider what the reason can be the result of as your assertion. Whatever your assertion is, think of the result that assertion would bring about and use that as your reason and see what happens. It'll help us understand causes and results better. And it will help us build a syllogism that proves something. If we make a cause and result relationship between our assertion about the subject and the reason. Because of the meaningfulness of these three relationships. In order to know that the assertion about the topic is true, we have to know that the reason we've given for the assertion is true of the topic. Because if not, if our reason for the assertion is meaningless to the topic, then our assertion is meaningless to the topic. So if 1 and 3 doesn't hold, doesn't matter what else you say. Then if 1 and 3 does hold, if there is this relationship between your topic and this, what the reason is about, then you look to see whether there is both this positive necessity and negative necessity, because it takes both to prove that your reason for the assertion is actually the reason. It takes both a positive necessity and a negative necessity in that order to show that what we said about the object is correct. And that sequence of understanding is really, really useful in our exploration of what do they mean by seeds ripening into an object. What does it take for me to know what it is I'm experiencing? It's not that we do logical analysis with every sip of tea, but really working on this sequence of thinking will help us unravel like this process of seeds ripening, perceiving an object, reacting to the object, responding to the object, planting new seeds. We'll understand better the existence of any given thing when we understand these three relationships. better. Mm. So a, a correct reason that has to do with a result. Then the Rangshin Taiyangdak is a correct reason by way of Rangshin, its own nature, a correct reason which involves a nature. And we're going to cover this in depth in another class. And then the third kind of correct reason is this ma mikpe tayandak. Mikpe, we know, is perceiving, seeing. Ma mikpe is somehow to not see, but it means the absence of something, a correct reason by way of an absence of something. And learning to use a correct reason to prove an absence of something is helpful for us to be able to come to this conceptualized perception of the truth of the no self nature of any experience we're having, and know that to be an existing thing. You know, Geshe says you can have the presence of an absence, and we have it with every object that is a presence. We also have the presence of its absence, and it's like, and learning what a reason by way of an absence of something, how to use that, helps us in this learning how to know that we're perceiving the emptiness of something as we're perceiving the something. Similar to how we train ourselves to be aware of the space the object is in, when just by seeing the object there, it's training us to being able to know the thing's emptiness without seeing it directly. It's the same idea, mamik tayandak. That's the second half of class 5. And we're done early. That's okay with me. I don't want to start into class 6 and stop it halfway through. So any questions, anything you want to? Geshe spent time doing some debate. I'm happy to do that if you want to try. I'm not all that prepared. Otherwise, we can all finish and go to bed early. Going once, going twice. So remember
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
You have a
Masarani.
question? You have a comment?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, please.
Question. I always find this definition of fresh, and unerring.
Uh,
So is valid perception? It's like it's talking about the mental, right? The mental part, and then is it related to the division into Rangrik and Shenrik? We say the
which
mental thing is
the
divided
fresh,
into Rangrik and Shenrik. So is this valid perception? How do I phrase the question? This valid perception is
which
divided into these two, right? Sorry, how can I say that? No. Because we say valid perception has to be fresh. So, and we did say that it's 99% of the time that we are so-called having valid perception. But how can we have valid perception if it's fresh? Let's say if we look at just now the example that we went past the tree, the car that knocked into the tree. So
Right.
the first time is fresh and hence is a valid perception.
Right, the fresh is the car against the tree. What I'm experiencing right now is the fresh.
If I look at it the second time, like let's say I stay there for 10 minutes, I will have
Uh,
many perception of that, right? That
yeah.
means the rest of the 9 minutes would not be a valid perception. Is that the understanding?
No, no, I don't think so. I think lower school would say, as long as you are standing there in front of that thing, you are having fresh, valid perception, meaning current, what I'm experiencing right now.
Mm.
And then memory is you go home later and you say to your family, I saw this car against the tree. It looked like a terrible accident. The car against the tree thought that you're having, image that you're having, that's memory. And lower school says that's clearly different than standing there at the accident site looking at it.
Okay, okay. But
So
if
the
let's say
one I'm
okay.
experiencing now
Mm-mm, mm,
and
mm.
now and now and now is
Okay, so
the
those are valid perception. Okay. If I pass by the place again on my way home and the car against the tree is still there, and I say, yeah, I remember this morning there was a car that knocked into this tree. If the car is not there, then I say that it's not a valid perception, right? Because it's from my
you're
memory.
correct. It's from your memory.
But if the car is still there, the tree is still there, that
Then the
means
one you're perceiving at the time is again fresh
okay, okay.
because it's current. Think of fresh.
Mm,
It's
mm.
current. It's the one I'm having right now. You could stand there. I would guess you could stand there having the fresh car against the tree. And you could also be remembering what it was when you drove by in the morning. Because, the light's going to be different. Who knows? There's going to be
Mm,
different, some differences between then and now. So you could still have, not at the same time, the memory of it, which is not fresh unerring perception. It's memory. So then if you're having the memory, I saw that thing against the tree, you're having
a
a
memory.
memory
Mm, mm,
perception.
mm, mm,
That's
mm.
why higher school says that memory perception is still a valid perception. Your memory is existing in this moment. That's the experience you're having. Lower school says, yeah, but that's not the thing, because lower school believes there is that functioning reality outside of us, right? Lower schools are functionalist schools, things that do things exist, not self existently. They have their own causes and conditions, but they are real things. They're there. And so then it's different to experience the thing than it is to experience a memory of the thing. Highest school says, yes, it's a different experience, but the process of experiencing is the same.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. And the second question, I think, is last lesson. I'm trying to relate that 5 hips to this division of the things. And I recall that you mentioned that we say five, Koshi Michael was saying 5 hips covers all existing things.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so but we say that 5 hips, okay, it's like it's our layman term of the first one is the form, okay, which we can understand, right? That's external, internal, okay, fine. Then the rest of the four are actually related to the mind,
Right,
right? So, but our mind is also changing.
right,
So if it's changing, it is not considered as unchanging, correct?
correct. Our mind is not an unchanging thing.
So where do I'm looking at more the f- the scope of things. So
Mhm.
if it's unchanging, right? And then all existing thing is like the bigger scope, which has the changing and unchanging, right?
Right, right.
So, but the mind is changing. So how can the five hips covers all existing things? Because we will have the unchanging thing that is not covered by the mind.
Is the mind not empty?
The emptiness of the mind, the
Right.
emptiness of the mind. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, I need to think about it.
I don't know. It's really slippery because
Mm,
where it's like, well, what do we really mean by all existing
mm,
things?
mm,
Are we
mm,
thinking all existing things? I mean, probably we're thinking, all material things. And then there are existing material things that we probably don't know anything about, and we still believe somehow that they are existing things we don't know anything about. And then we get into, like, if you say body and mind, parts of me are body and mind, then the body includes all material things, all things that could be called body.
mm-hmm,
And then mind is like every awareness that can be had. Well, whose awareness are we talking about? My awareness or your awareness? And it's like from lower school, it's like I can tell that you're aware. Exactly how I know that, I'm not quite sure. It seems like you move, it seems like you respond, it seems like you have eyes and you're like me. But how do I tell you as different from the pillow in Janet's background? And I know the pillow is not something that has awareness, but I know you do. Like, if that's in the thing somehow, then there should be a way that I can find that. And that if it's all my awareness, if that mind, if all existing things in the category of mind are limited to my mind, what does that say about the things that I see that have their own minds? Is that still an aspect of my mind? And that's where we would do this dance with the, logical debate analysis, because in our beginning understanding of Buddhism, it's like you have your own mind, I have my own mind. We don't become one mind. Even omniscient beings, they're aware of all these other minds. They're all separate minds. But doesn't it get a little confusing? How can you be omniscient, perceive everything in every mind, right? In all three times, like perceiving all existence, and then there be anything other than self. But then how can there be a self Buddha who's omniscient that isn't amongst other? There still has to be self and other, but it's understood and experienced so completely differently from that fully awakened state. And our minds are trying to say, well, which one is it really? Is there one mind that covers everything, or are all these minds different? And if there's all these minds are different, then what about all their mental functions that are going on? Are those really mine, or where is this category all existing things? And our logic should make it so clear. They're here, they're there, they're there. And what we find is that the logic reveals that, oh my gosh, the way I think it is or it should be can't be like that. Right? Logic actually will show us stuff that we can't otherwise directly see, and then we'll know it's true. And then the main thing it shows us is that the things that exist the way we think they do can't. Not just that they don't, but they can't. But it doesn't make them not be something we experience because you can't negate your personal experience that's happening right now. Even if you're drunk, it's still happening. It's just happening in a different way than you thought. But everything's happening in a different way than we think until we're arhat. So keep thinking, right? Keep like cogitating that. And if it just seems to be like, wait, you let it get really messy and then it'll start to sort out. So really
And
logic isn't going to prove us we're not going to use logic to prove what we think we already know. We're going to
mm,
use logic to prove ourselves wrong in everything we think we know. And that's a little backwards, right? Logic is supposed to prove me right. It's like, no, it's going to prove me wrong in my belief in things having their own nature. Yeah.
I'm trying to like match them because we say that we have faculty, six faculties, and then we have the consciousness, right? Against the, how do you call that? The outside world. So altogether they are counted as 18. I don't know why it's a word for it. I know it in Chinese, but not in English.
Yeah. I don't know it in English,
So,
categories or
so
something.
yeah, so 18 categories, yeah. So the one that I'm always confused is it's easy to understand the eye, ear, nose, all this, right? But the last category is the one that is difficult, right? Is that called mental consciousness? Is that right?
Right. Thought, right.
So that is against the Dharma, so-called, right? Because the eye can only see the shape and the color, correct? The ear can only hear the sound, for example, right? But the last category is the mental. Is it called mental?
Right. It's the consciousness, the awareness.
The
So
awareness,
the
right?
awareness of our thought.
Right. And that is going against, actually is so-called the Dharma. What is the word that you use? Yeah, that Rang Yu La Jupe, is that right? It's against everything in the world, right? Because that is the
What do you
Sanskrit word for
mean? Yes.
Dharma. Is it Dharma?
Dharma, all existing things.
Yeah, all existing things. So we are actually using the mind consciousness to recognize that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I'm trying to match them.
We, we have
I'm
to
not
have
sure whether I explained it.
yeah. We have to have the awareness of the thought. They call it conceptual thought
Conceptual, okay, conceptual thoughts.
in order, I guess, in order to string together the meaning or the relationships between the visual consciousness and the what the visual consciousness comes up with and what the auditory
Mm.
consciousness comes up with
Mm-hmm.
and what the
Mm-hmm.
tactile is coming up with, that those right, those are actually separate discrete
Mm, mm,
consciousnesses.
mm, mm.
And then there's one that's interpreting them, you could say,
Right, right. Yes, yeah.
right? Like telling the story about them. And then there's like the one that's aware that that story is happening. And words just fail because it can't be that there's a mind over here and the words are going like this and the mind's going, okay, I'm following the word. That just can't be. But then it also can't be that there's a visual consciousness out here hanging out and then the eyeball goes, oh, blue round. And he goes, oh, make, car out of that. It can't be there's this and then that. This is all an explanation of our moment by moment experience. And when we start trying to explain that moment by experience, you got to break it down into all these different pieces. And that's where this whole thing comes from. Trying to explain a moment of experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A lot
Fun.
to think.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Why it's worth doing this course again and again. So remember that person that we wanted to be able to help. Believe it or not, we've learned a lot that we will use sooner or later to help them stop their suffering forever. And that's a great, great goodness. So please be happy with yourself. And think of this goodness like a beautiful glowing gemstone you can hold in your hands. Recall your own precious holy being. See how happy they are with you. Feel your gratitude to them, your reliance upon them. Ask them to please, please stay close, to continue to guide you, help you, inspire you, give you clues about how to use this logic stuff. And then offer them this gemstone of goodness. See them accept it and bless it. And they carry it with them right back into your heart. See them there, feel them there. Their love, their compassion, their wisdom. It feels so good, we want to keep it forever, and so we know to share it. By the power of the goodness that we've just done, may all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the true ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom make. So use those 3 long exhales to share this goodness with that one person. To share it with everyone you love. To share it with every existing being everywhere. See them all filled with loving kindness, filled with wisdom. And may it be so. All right. Thank you, my dears. That is hard work.
Thank you very much.